Hey, what's up everyone, it's Anthony here. I just was editing this video and realized that I didn't do a very good job introing it. So this is just my interview with Noah Caldwell-Gervais. He's a very awesome YouTuber, as you'll find out in his intro that he does in a couple of seconds. I just realized I didn't do a very good job introing him, and I apologize for that. But yeah, here's the main video. Enjoy. I just wanted to start off, like, if you wanted to introduce yourself, what you do.
Sure. Well, my name is Noah Caldwell-Gervais, and I run a YouTube channel doing long-form game criticism, where I usually take one game and talk about it at length, or take a series of games and talk about how they change over time as a franchise.
That's the best way to put it. Yeah, definitely. It's I've been a subscriber of you since way beginning. I recommend everyone to check him out. Like, let's just start off from the beginning. Like, how did you start? Where did you get your start? How did you like decide to make this sort of like a thing you were going to do beyond just the first couple of videos?
Well, just the positive response from the first couple of videos, pretty much.
With your Half-Life one?
I well, it was actually like the Fallout one was the one I did first, and I originally did that video because I got really irritated at sort of the discussion being had between Fallout 3 fans and Fallout New Vegas fans. I felt like neither of them were really putting it in context as far as like where the games came from and like what Bethesda was trying to do. And like now that Fallout 4 came out, like I have a little more sympathy for the people who are railing against Fallout 3 maybe, but uh, at the time, like I really wanted to just put all the games in order and context, and I didn't feel like people were doing that. And people really dug that. And so I just kept doing it. Like it's really easy to come up with like a good run of games. Like not outside of just like doing entire franchises, like coming up with different videos to do is one of the really fun parts about it. Like you don't want for ideas.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see your sort of your process, and that's something I wanted to talk about as well. Like, how long does it take you to some start to finish for a video? What exactly is your process?
It depends. So when I'm going through, I record short clips of bits that seem like iconic or important, uh, like something visually in the background in a level that's really good or really interesting, or something that's like really critical to the plot that I'll probably want to talk about later on. And then I just sort of archive all of those, and then I go through and I name the clips so that they're easier to find later on. Uh, and then after I'm done with the game, I'll write sort of my script about the whole thing, which just is really just an essay, basically. I'll write an essay about what's going on, and like I'll try to have a thesis that runs through the thing. And like when I'm doing the larger franchise videos, that's sort of what's key is to have sort of like one point that I'm trying to make that kind of persists through the criticism of like all of the series of games. To have that sort of like line that people can keep following through. Because like I make crazy long videos, and it's not really reasonable to expect people to pay attention to me for that long if I'm just dicking around. So like try to have like a consistent idea that you can follow from one end of the video to the other.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed and I appreciate is you sort of even like down to the point in like your descriptions you give like timestamps and stuff like that for the sections if people want to skip around. Just like a question I was wondering is did you like where did you learn this sort of like long form writing and everything, like do you have any like formal education, like are you just like a lover of writing or?
I have some formal education. Like I've been to college a couple of times, but it didn't really stick. Like every time I've tried to go to college, I've been working full time at the same time, and like trying to have a personal life, and like I am bad with time management with all of those things. So college hasn't produced any certification for me. Like, but I've been like I do well at classes, and I've enjoyed my time at college. I've just never finished a program, basically. Um, to do. But I read a lot of books. What I do with the scripts and with the criticism is actually really, really, really traditional as far as like literary criticism is concerned. Like so I was adopted, but it was an open adoption. So I know like all four of my parents, and all four of them have taught college at some point. Like I come from a very academic background, like as far as like my parents are concerned. I grew up reading a lot of books, and I don't know, for the games writing, it's kind of a fusion of like really traditional literary criticism with travel writing, really. Like travel authors really blend historical stuff with descriptive stuff all the time, and like taking that style of sort of like contextualized adventure and applying it to the kind of like adventures that he got going on in games seemed like an easy fit.
That's great. Yeah, I've never really thought about sort of like applying the travel writing, style to the game reviews. But that's exactly what I think makes you sort of a different game reviewer. Is you keep sort of like your quirks into the video. You leave some of your mess ups, and you have like a very style that's very much you. And I was always wondering, like, with the you're sort of like your record player with the piece of paper in front of it. Like, where did you get that? Was it just sort of just what you had at the moment, or like
I
with your intros and everything? I mean,
I well again it started with the Fallout video. I was like I'll do a live intro with like my desk fan and like I've got all of this like 50s shit. I'll just sort of like set it up like that. And it sort of kept going because initially for like the first few videos I was doing I was using Windows Movie Maker and like my first year's worth of videos looked like they were shaken around in a garbage can before like being posted on YouTube. Like the quality is just terrible. And a lot of that was on account of the software I was using and like not knowing how to get a really truly usable result out of it. But to sort of like prepare people for the fact that it was going to be like a lo-fi experience throughout, I decided to keep doing like the live titles and like when you look at the analytics, like 60% of people who like click on the video stop watching within the first like 30 seconds. They're like, "Oh, this guy, no way." And that's fine because like what's left are the people who are like actually interested in like trying to pay attention to like what I'm trying to say. So like the people who want the kind of like flashy, punchy videos that like a lot of people do know right away within the first like 20 seconds that I'm not going to deliver and they can like close the window and go on to something else. So I think that's a reason why like my comment sections are usually pretty quiet is because like people know right away if it's like something they're going to be willing to pay attention to or not.
yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a good point and a good segue into like you mentioned the sort of flashy YouTuber type, and the YouTube nowadays has sort of gone from or has evolved into rather sort of a personality driven review that's more about the person talking than the content on screen, or sort of the flashy editing and everything. Like what is your opinion on sort of that sort of maybe the 10-minute, 5-minute reviews, or quote unquote retrospectives that are actually sort of very much surface level Wikipedia level sort of stuff. Do you have like an opinion on that kind of stuff, or?
Well, the thing is, like, I straight up wouldn't be able to begin to compete with the kind of stuff that they were doing because, like, the the people who are like, oh no, Caldwell-Gervais doesn't know how to edit at all, are close to the truth. Like, I really am not a great video editor. And it's something I feel like I improve on a little bit with every video, but like my competency is a glacial improvement for sure as far as video editing is concerned. And like the thing about these like flashy shorter videos is that like they don't have the same kind of like analytical content that my
Yeah.
videos do, but they do take a really long time to produce. Like people who are like doing cuts like every few seconds and like getting them to blend and like that is unbelievably painstaking. And like that's one of the reasons why I like using longer cuts is because I feel like you can sort of get a sense better of like what the rhythm of the game is like if you watch it from like 20 to 60 seconds as opposed to like 3 or 4 seconds. And like you can use the clips, or I feel like I can use the clips a little more. I don't know. I'm not sure what the word I'm going for is.
No, absolutely. Like your style, your editing style and your sort of your video style very much fits what you're talking about and how your writing is. It's very much long form. So your
Yeah,
clips are longer. I get it.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm really with like the way my videos are formatted. I'm just trying to play to my strengths, and I feel like my strengths are pretty much all in the scripting.
Hmm.
Um,
And did you on the topic of video reviews? What made you sort of? I know you were sort of stumbled into it, and you got some initial like fame from it and some attention. But did you ever think about going into some like maybe traditional text reviews, like signing up with the website or whatever? Because you very much you have a you. I mean, you're a great writer from what I can tell, and just I would see that working very well in a traditional text form. Did you ever think about doing that?
I've definitely thought about it, but the other thing is that like I've slowly been like carving out my own niche. Like there's only like a couple dozen people who are doing long form reviews at all, and everybody does their shit differently. Like everyone has a different style of producing their reviews from a technical standpoint, like different thematic focuses, different design focuses. Like it's really cool to be part of this really specific community that's like as far as YouTube game stuff goes, like relatively small. Uh, and just like participating in that and participating in the discourse in like this particular niche, it's really fun. And like it's really, really overcrowded in like traditional text reviewing. Like it's very competitive to try to find a job doing that. And so like I've sort of found this little corner of reviewing that's relatively underpopulated so far and that's still able to accommodate the kind of like low production videos that I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. The video sort of yeah, it does differentiate you, I think. With with how you sort of have carved out this niche and everything, obviously, you know, YouTube being the beast it is and how it's evolved, it can't be financially stable. Like moving to Patreon, no, like going on to that, how have you seen it like help you? Is it like do you view it like as like a stable platform moving forward in your life? Like how has it helped you in your YouTube quote unquote career?
Well, it's the I've been doing Patreon for the past year and it like literally changed my life to be able to have that extra income. Like I was able to stop working at the pizzeria I was working at and I was working there like full time for 4.5 years. Like I literally mopped the same floor 1,000 times, and it was just driving me so crazy to be like in that same room for so long. And the crowdfunding actually allowed me to move away from that, and then like over the summer, and then like the summer was good, but like I can't do games 100% of the time, or I'll go crazy also. So like I got a part-time job again, and like now the balance between doing YouTube and like having a real job like out in the world and getting out the house, like it's a solid balance. Really enjoying it. But Patreon, like I don't consider it stable because it's at will. Like if I screw up and like disappoint everybody, then the money goes away. Like the cool thing about it though is that the people who are donating to me seem to really dig me doing the stuff that I'm doing in the style that I'm doing it. So long as I'm just sort of true to how I'm doing my stuff, like I don't really see myself going wrong with it. But like I'm also depending on the generosity of strangers, and you can't like just lean on that and expect it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I get it, and that's the problem. Is it's such a rocky new form. Like Patreon's a relatively new website, and I mean, you're one of the first. You're one of the and for somebody with as low of subscribers, like no offense, it's just it's like it's not as much as most. It's you're making more than most people are in the month, and it's great to see that like people that actually want to support this niche can actually go out and actively support their people, their content creators, and help them make a living in something that they couldn't just off of straight ad revenue.
Yeah, I've really been blown away by sort of the breadth of generosity. Like I've got like at or around 300 patrons at the moment, which is just a crazy number to me. Like I really appreciate it so much, and like between that and the income that I'm making doing pizzas again, and like doing it part time is just no problem. Like show up 3 days a week, listen to rock and roll, make pizza, and then come home with enough for rent. I mean, easy, done. Like between that and Patreon, like I've got enough to actually like move things forward the way I'm trying to move things forward. Like I'm hopefully going to be able to include actual travel videos in my lineup this year, and that's pretty much wholly due to the fact that I've got this combined income from uh, crowdfunding and like pizza covering my bases.
So do you feel like, does it make you feel sort of pressured into making more content, or does it make you actually feel a little more relieved?
Well, it's a little stressful in that you got to be careful with your time management. Like I was very poor with my time management in January, and I started like three projects at once and didn't finish any of them by the time January came to a close. And like I'm trying to do at least one video a month, so that like people have like something for their money, you know. Um, and so I'm gonna end up having like several videos in February because I did like 70% of three different projects. But like I didn't pull it together enough to actually get any of them out the door in a month, and like that's something that's hard to figure out.
Yeah, okay. I understand that. Like, where do you see your channel sort of growing in the future? You say you have a lot of projects. So do you find that releasing them when they're done, or do you want to like stick to a schedule, or just where do you see like the future of your channel being?
Oh, I always just release it when it's done, and that's pretty much for everything. Um, in the future, I want to just keep doing the game videos like I'm doing, but I also want to be able to do analytic travel content too. Like I want to be able to get into sort of unpacking travelogues and sort of roadside attractions the same way that I've been unpacking games. Sort of take the exact same style of video that I'm doing with the video game reviews and actually carry it on over to the real world. And like I've always been a huge fan of road trips and like scenic byways, and like I've got a hell of a library as far as like where to find that sort of stuff is concerned. And like a lot of people just don't know that kind of stuff anymore. So I'm really excited to start doing videos like about roadside attractions and about like real world experiences. And like that's sort of the next step. And like it's something that I do need the crowdfunding for because like it requires, you know, gas and food and like time as opposed to like doing the video game reviews, which I can do like in the background of just my everyday life.
Yeah, the travelogues sound awesome, and yeah, I can definitely see a crossover in your styles, definitely into that. And you mentioned that you read a lot of travel books, and is that something you'd like, I stretching out here, would you ever want to write a book, sort of in that sense?
Kinda. Like I did get to scratch that itch with my channel already. After I did my Half-Life video, I was like, well, let me do a travel thing real quick, and real quick actually ended up being like almost 2 months for doing like the slideshow basically that I did, like the hour and 45-minute slideshow about my trip in the 73 Mercury, and like that's a pretty traditional sort of like nostalgic backward-looking travelogue. And like I definitely wrote it at the right time in my life for it. Like it was 3 or 4 years after the trip, which is enough time to like really sort of think about it and not too far that you forget the details of it. So like I'm glad that I took the time to do that, but like people also completely forgot who I was in the like 2 months that it took to do that, and it took a while to get the momentum of my channel back on track. So like. I might write a book at some point, but at this point, like I'm really focused on the channel and like making it work that besides like there's almost nothing more irritating than people who talk about like writing a book when they haven't like actually written anything. Like that's definitely one of my personal pet peeves. So like
Yeah, when you say you're thinking about doing something, you're never gonna get it done. Yeah.
never get it done. So like I definitely might try writing a book at some point, but at this point like there's so much stuff that I'm trying to do with my channel. Like I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Moving on to sort of just like your thoughts on some things. Like I was always just wondering like with like you talk a lot about game mechanics, story, everything. Like if you were to see if there was one game mechanic in the recent years that you sort of liked, which one would it be, and one that like sort of you would dislike as well?
Mm. Uh, the thing that I like most about recent games that is not exactly a mechanic is that I love how people are doing their lighting and their environments. Like Mad Max wasn't a great game, but it was a very beautiful game.
Yep.
And like Fallout 4 wasn't a great game, but it was a very beautiful game. And like I've been enjoying just the depth of detail that people have been putting into their environments. Mechanically speaking, though, I don't know. I haven't really truly been thrilled by a whole lot of mechanics in a while. Like everything in a lot of ways is kind of standardized these days, and there's not a whole lot that's like super innovative. Like people are talking a lot about The Witness, and I haven't played The Witness yet, but like that's still like an outline puzzle game kind of deal. Like one of my favorite games last year was Dying Light for sure, and Dying Light didn't do anything innovative mechanically, but like the just the rhythms of it were just so solid and so enjoyable. And like the way they did the gradient lighting for different times of day, and like how they incorporated that like as a timing mechanic and a mechanic for building pressure, like that was brilliant. Like Dying Light didn't necessarily do anything new, but the things that it did were just really super on point.
Absolutely. Yeah, the combination of all the, the overdone mechanics worked in a way
Yeah.
that it definitely did. Yeah, shine. Um, yeah, but and sort of one that you wish maybe could be brought back, one that you dislike?
Wh- Uh, let's see. Something that I dislike. I dislike the integration of like corporate stuff into games. Like I've been playing a lot of the Old Republic this past month, and like all the cartel market shit is just terrible. Like having things in games be linked to money, like how you can use a money store in like Dead Space 3 for God's sake. Like
Yeah, single player games. Yeah.
that's definitely like my least favorite development.
You perfectly segued into the next one about microtransactions. Like my question was, there's just been sort of a shift in the current gaming scene towards microtransactions and season passes as well as DLC. Like, what would you predict that the sort of long-term impact for this could be? Like, do you think it'll hit a head where consumers actually stop buying things, or?
Well, that's the thing about it is that before it comes to a head, trends like that almost always divert because games can't survive unless they're profitable. So if everyone keeps doing something that really does alienate a huge part of their customer base, they will knock it off. Which is why like not all DLC is like horse armor shit, right? Like there's some DLC that is really, really extensive and tight and worth it, and then
Absolutely,
there's
yeah.
a lot that's not, and it's the sort of diversity of the market that's gonna continue. Like people who are being introduced to gaming through like mobile gaming are sort of more conditioned to put up with that sort of thing. And I think like as the gaming market goes on, people who get into it through that avenue are just going to be more comfortable with the paid elements. And I think there's a chance that like they could become more prominent as time goes on because of that, because people are just more comfortable with it as an idea. But On the same flip, on the flip side of the coin, like there's always going to be people making games in the traditional way. Like if you look at what Obsidian's doing with like Pillars of Eternity and the new Torment and Beamdog putting out Baldur's Gate 1.5.
Yep.
Like all the old school stuff is still being marketed. It's just being marketed on the indie level because like the AAA studios aren't willing to put in the time for the smaller audience. But the smaller studios can afford to put in the time for the smaller audiences, smaller studios, smaller audiences. The indie scene.
Yeah, that's sort of going forward. I bet that's probably what is going to be the ultimate compromise. Is we're going to have a rise of the indie, which we already do. We have the rise of the indie scene, but those will be the people that sort of keep it towards the traditional, and then we have the AAA developers with the microtransactions and everything. Because you're right, it is mobile gaming is insanely more profitable than the AAA scene on consoles and PC. You know.
Well, it's becoming more commonly popular too. My girlfriend's dad played a ton of tabletop D&D back in the day, but he plays Clash of the Clans on his tablet like these days as a game. Like he doesn't
Wow.
do the role-playing games. He does the thing that like all of his friends are doing. So like he does fantasy football and he also does Clash of the Clans with like all of his drinking buddies. So like the thing about the mobile games is that like the things that are like kind of obvious, like behavioralist feedback, like just to get you to keep doing it, uh, they really work. I mean, that's one of the reasons why World of Warcraft was such a breakout hit, like among people who don't ordinarily play games, is because it had all of these systems of feedback that are almost like Las Vegas slot machine style, like immediate, positive, irregular reinforcement. Like, I forgot what study it was or who it did it, but this is a Googleable study. There was a study done with parrots where they had a lever that would dispense a treat, and they had several setups. One would do it like every other time, one would do it every time, and after a certain point, they turned the levers off so that they would no longer dispense food, and then charted how many times the pigeons would continue to hit the lever after it had stopped dispensing. And the pigeons who would keep going at it the longest, and like they kept going at it like 3 times longer than the other groups, are the ones that have been rewarded irregularly. Like you don't know when the
Huh.
food is going to pop out.
That makes
So
sense. Yeah.
like there's all of these like little behavioralist pieces of design that are present in mobile games and like MMOs like World of Warcraft, which like hook people. And like it gets a lot of people into gaming, but they are sort of like simple and obvious tricks.
Okay. Yeah. It it's just a bummer.
Well, not necessarily. Like I think like Obsidian isn't like an indie studio. It's like it's mid-size. And I think that instead of like having the imbalance you have of like a lot of tiny indie studios and a lot of AAA studios, I think you'll have more mid-sized studios later on that cater to like a particular sort of gaming audience for their particular sort of genre focus.
Yeah, absolutely. We have like I have a good example with Psyonix and Rocket League. I don't know if you've played that game, but it it very much is a very niche. It's not a very niche game. It's huge. It's a very big game, but it's a very specific sort of pick up and play game. But its community loves it so much that they go out and actively buy all the DLCs that come out, which is just, cosmetic stuff like new cars that don't affect anything. Like
Yeah,
that's a good way of doing sort of the DLC microtransaction model in a way that, I mean, almost League of Legends almost does it in a correct way as well. Any of those open, like those free to play MOBA games, like there is a right way of doing it, definitely. I just feel like we're in that infant phase where we're figuring out what works, what doesn't, and that's the bummer for me at least.
it's definitely a time of major transition, but it'll settle out and it'll settle out in a way where everyone who's willing to spend money on a certain sort of game is going to be able to spend money on it. I'm pretty positive of that.
I I one of my favorite of your videos, and it's almost to the point. I mean, I don't exactly agree with the video, and that's why I like it so much. Is your postal critique?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
no, is that one of your most like? divisive ones? I don't.
Oh, it's absolutely one of my most divisive ones. A lot of people are still pretty steamed at me for that one.
See, it's not that. I loved the critique, and it was. Go on. Sorry.
No, the funny thing about the Postal retrospective is that I didn't initially plan to be even all that negative about the series. Like, Hatred came out, and everyone was getting all up in a wad about Hatred being, like, so violent and so bad. And it's like, didn't we already have this conversation in 1997? Like, haven't we sort of, like, settled that, like, yeah, this game looks offensive and awful, but it also looks cheap and dumb. Like, doesn't that even it out? Like, and so I went back to Postal to sort of be like, we've been having this conversation all this time, like, didn't settle out. And like for Postal 1 and Hatred, like that ended up doing it. But it actually took me 50 hours to get through like the Postal Two's main campaign and Apocalypse Weekend and the Paradise Lost expansion. And the just I got so pissed by the end of it. Like I just wanted my time with the game to end. And
Okay.
I just had to get to the root of like where this game went off the rails. So I ended up just deconstructing like yeah, it's trying to be a satire, but does it actually get there at any
Hmm.
point in time? Like it's the smugness of Postal 2 that ended up pushing the critique in the direction that it ended up going. Like the self-satisfied tone of the game just fucking killed me. Like it made me so angry over the course of 50 hours with this shit. Like had my time investment been lower, I probably would have been less harsh. But like I ended up with a bone to pick about it.
Yeah, yeah, and I love when you start talking about how like the main audience would probably be the angsty teens, and that they would probably grow out of it. But do you believe that there's like some lines, at least when it comes to the childness of it, that like there's some lines that just like do you think it crossed any sort of, for you, moral lines, either sort of, be it in its humor or in its, in the stuff it depicts, not particularly hatred, because that's sort of like a one trick pony,
Yeah,
but in Postal's view, do you
it's
think?
it's not so much any individual joke. It's just the presentation of the jokes in aggregate
Hmm.
is just really frustrating. It's the sort of the persistent tone that anyone who would get offended at the game is just wrong because it's just a game, right? And like that's the thing that like I really go after in the video, really more so than the game itself because the game is kind of basic, is the idea that you'd have to be some kind of moron to be offended by it. I feel like about 80 to 85% of people who play the game are probably going to find themselves offended by it at some point. And I mean, that is the intention, to deliberately offend people. And like, it's fine if you want to make a game that way, but don't expect people to like give you positive reviews. Like
Hmm.
it's that's the other thing. Like with running with scissors is that like going back to the very beginning, like I was reading like an interview with the Running with Scissors guy from like way back in the day, like a decade easy before Gamergate, where he was like, the corrupt games media is twisting my company and like my image and like, how dare these people? And like just going off with the exact same kind of thing that like you would expect from the Gamergate crowd today. And like that conversation has been
Yeah.
going on for a decade as well, and I thought that that parallel was interesting. But
Yeah, but and I'm sure that's, is that comment that you just said right there, was that what you were getting the most comments about on your video?
the fact that I said like a mean thing about Gamergate is the reason why I got
Okay.
comments about it. Like the folks in that movement are very defensive of themselves, and because I said a bad thing about them, they were going to have to come out and correct me about it. But the thing is, like, I don't feel like I was mischaracterizing any of their ideas.
No, because that's basically the mantra is that. there's corruption in games media. You just happen to it happened to come out of a mouth of a crazy game developer.
Well,
So
not so much the corruption in games media thing, but just that sort of reductive attitude towards gaming that it is at its heart frivolous, and when you try to do more stuff, you're just adding pretense to it. Like at its heart, like Postal and games like Postal are like a willful rejection of the idea that games have to mean something. And like that's the most common defense of Postal is that like it is well and truly meaningless, so why even bother to criticize it? And it's like, you spend time with the game, you engage with the game's ideas, like it's not meaningless. It's 50 hours of bad jokes, like with a very particular political bent.
yeah.
Like, um, so it's not meaningless, and games aren't meaningless, and like every game has a point to make, like something that it's interested in conveying. And like I don't agree with sort of the fundamental idea that games are for fun. Like Postal 2 is for fun, but it's for a very specific kind of fun for a very
hmm
specific kind of person.
That's interesting because I on that topic, moving away from Postal, but staying on that topic, I've seen that other interview on your channel, and one of the first things that you say is that you liken like even older games to sort of baseball on the radio. However, even baseball has a story to be told. Like even games
Yeah,
back in the day have a story to be told. Do you believe that like every possible game, like even down to same like multiplayer only games, can have a story to be told?
absolutely. Did you read Ready Player One by any chance?
I did, yes.
Do you know the scene where him and Anorak are playing Joust together?
Yes, yeah.
Like that scene is so tense because Joust really does have its own particular like set of rules and its own rhythms, and like there's a barcade down in Renton that has a Joust machine that I got to play on, and like it doesn't have a story. I mean, it's people with lances on
hmm
flying ostriches or whatever.
Right.
Like it's ridiculous, but the rhythms of it still create tension, and like anything involving players in a system is going to have an emergent story. And then like with more modern games, you can have a more deliberate like production story on top of it. But if you have a competitive system, you'll end up getting a story out of it just because you've got, two players in dynamic conflict.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. And just from that clip heard and then hearing it from you now, like it's definitely changed the way I've sort of thinking about things when it comes to that. Like I don't particularly play game. I'm sort of the person that plays games for its mechanics, and just thinking about it like that, like even I can then find sort of like a narrative in a game. Um, that's basically about it. Like I've exhausted the questions that I've written. Um, and yeah, is there anything that you'd like to say in conclusion, I guess?
I I don't know. I'm working on a StarCraft video at the moment, and I'm actually having a lot of difficulty with it because, like, so much of StarCraft and the way people experience it is the multiplayer component, and the personalities involved in the multiplayer StarCraft scene. Like, I used to work with a guy who followed Husky StarCraft,
Yeah,
like, all the time. Like, every
religiously.
lunch break, he was, like, pulling up a match that Husky StarCraft was narrating. And, like, I'm very disconnected from that part of StarCraft, and like I interviewed a fella who has been following the competitive StarCraft scene for years to like try to fill in like the gaps in my knowledge, but like it's difficult. Like it's been really difficult for me to approach StarCraft because there's more going on than I'm actually able to get at just playing it on my own and not being very skilled at it. Um, and so, like, when you talk about games like as emergent systems, like StarCraft is really two different games to two different people. Like people who are just playing it on their own casually and people who are playing it professionally, and then like a third category of just like dedicated observers of the game. Like, I think that's how you know that, like, video games have really made it as far as like a deep cultural kind of way. Like StarCraft is broadcast on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's appreciable by many different levels of audience, and like games in the games market, like there's a lot of frustrations to be had, but it really is truly and genuinely diverse. Like you can have so many sorts of experiences with games that you couldn't have growing up. Like games have become so refined and so interesting. I really can't think of a better time to be a gamer than 2016. Like for all its frustrations, I think it is a really beautiful time for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's with the StarCraft thing. I didn't. You cut out for 1 second, so I don't. When you were listing the type of people, the camps that people are in. But did you mention the sort of custom community, like the custom map community?
No, I didn't. I'm not even really aware of that aspect, that element of it.
That's definitely like the. I mean, it's built into StarCraft 2. That's where Dota came from, or like Dota-like games have come from. Obviously, Dota came from Warcraft, but I mean like the Blizzard games have always had custom matches, and like there's a whole communities around types of games where like role playing in StarCraft. There's even third person shooters in StarCraft too. Like I mean that's what drew me to it back when it came out in I think that was my senior year of high school. Um, but yeah, that's another thing to look at. My family just took in a foreign exchange student from Korea,
Oh wow.
and that talking to him was a culture shock. Like he's talking about how they have a dedicated channel on TV for StarCraft 1, and
Man.
it's beyond an esport there. It's an actual sport. Sports come on after StarCraft. It's bizarre, and it's like their national sport, and that's not even a lie. He plays it. He still plays it to this day, and yeah, they get six-figure salaries, man.
Yeah, that's ultimately the thing about games is that you can't predict what the long-term cultural impact of them is going to be necessarily. Like I don't think Blizzard, especially like Blizzard in 1998, had any idea what was going to happen with it. Like
Yeah.
I honestly, that's been one of the craziest things is like growing up alongside Blizzard as a company and like seeing them go from like this really tiny studio to like an international titan of like gaming business is just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The community took it where it is now. Like, obviously
Yeah.
they helped, but it's ultimately up to the community to guide it years later down the line, even down to like the Doom community, which is near and dear to my heart. But it's still going on to this day. That was released in '93. It's 25, almost 25 years later.
Yeah, I was really really stunned when Romero put out a new level like a
Yeah.
weeks back, like his first in like 20 years he said or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that
Yeah,
was
that's his warm up for a new game.
that was so cool. Like just having like being able to experience everything that's happened since 1993 and still to have the original figures involved in it is really super cool.
Absolutely, yeah. You're right. The longevity of games is definitely something that is and definitely differentiates it from something like a movie. A movie we can pop into a TV and view it, but it's never gonna change. It's never gonna be different from the last time you saw it. Like when you watch a StarCraft game or play it, it'll always change for you. You know.
Yeah, I've considered doing a World of Warcraft video, but like I haven't gotten up the willpower to actually like commit that much time to
That
the
would be
game.
insane. How would
But
you go back? Would you find like a vanilla WoW server to get footage? Like how would you do that?
well, that's the thing. I probably wouldn't be able to get footage of it. Like the game
Mm-hmm.
that I played originally is pretty much well and gone. Like
It's yeah, buried. Yeah.
I'll literally never be able to experience it the same way again.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing. That's another thing. They have with those multiplayer games, you can't really revisit your nostalgia.
Yeah.
Man. Okay, well, thank you very much for this. This was awesome. It was
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me and such.
yeah, yeah. Thank you very